welcome back to the channel. It's Lauren. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Today, I wanted to talk about collecting makeup and makeup that's really collectible to me. I want to talk about it in like a past, present, and future type of way, and also kind of just define what I feel like makes makeup collectible, at least to me, like some of the things that get me. And I feel like over the course of me enjoying and loving makeup, I have transitioned through a lot of different phases. I've been at a phase where I'm just like kind of collecting like any and all makeup. I've definitely been in stages where I'm trying to pare down to as little as possible. I feel like currently I'm in more of an ebb and flow, especially I think because I do YouTube. I try to be mindful of my purchases, but also like makeup is a huge part of my life. And so I've kind of come to accept that there will always be, you know, new makeup coming into my life, which I love. And I think when we're talking about makeup collections, whatever works for you and what you actually want to do, what works for your budget, all those things are totally personal. But I wanted to talk about the just like most collectible type makeup, at least to me, what makes me, against my better judgment, want it, or like to kind of, with no brain thought, like buy and add to collection. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you just want that satisfaction of completing a collection, you know, like having the full thing. I don't know if you're like that, if you're like a collector. I've always been a collector in my life. I remember I used to collect Beanie Babies. I used to have a rock collection. Like as a child, I was definitely someone who enjoyed having things, putting them in their place, having order, like all those things. So to me, it's pretty natural to want to collect things, especially things that I find beautiful or that I really enjoy. But I do find with makeup, there is this like other element where it does at some point go bad. And I also want it to be this kind of living collection, meaning I'm reaching for things. I don't want just things collecting dust. I actually want things in my makeup collection that are going to get use at some point or be something that excites me and inspires me to use my stuff. But there are some things out there, man, that despite my better judgment, despite knowing all the things I actually want out of my collection, make me want to buy them for no other reason than to just have that item and to be up to date with whatever, you know, line that items releasing from. Anyway, I hope you guys will enjoy this idea. I'm sticking to just eyeshadow palettes today, so if you want to see a part 2, I do have like other things that I find collectible besides eyeshadow palettes. Also, real fast, if you like this eyeshadow look, definitely go check out my last video. It's using the new Rem Beauty stuff from Ariana Grande, so check that out if you're interested. But let's get into this. I want to talk first about what I find collectible. Like, what are the attributes of makeup that I really enjoy? So this will be a bit of a talking part. I'll leave timestamps down below in case you want to skip this and just get into the items. But I made a little list because I find it fascinating what actually gets me and what doesn't, because there are a lot of makeup items that who cares? I don't need it. I don't want to collect it. I don't care to buy it. And then of course, like I said, there are things that I just want so badly. So first off, price is definitely something. Now, price is a mixture. So it can be something high price that I want to collect, but I do find for me to actively want to collect it, if it's going to be super expensive, I don't want the frequency of that release to be too often, or I know I can't keep up and that makes me lose interest. So it's like a fine line these brands have to walk for me to want it, and I'm sure they have everyone on their marketing department ready and, you know, willing to do the research to figure this out for people. But it's always nice for me to be something in like a mid-range. I find the mid-range is like expensive enough for me to feel like I treasure this item, that I don't treat it poorly, because sometimes like it's not right, but I feel like sometimes when something's really inexpensive, really cheap, you look at it as something that's very replaceable. So I find like to truly collect something, I tend to covet those items a little bit more. So I find like a mid-range is usually about the price point I would collect something at. But it's sometimes nice when something's inexpensive so that you can actually, you know, if you're gonna go all in and collect, you're actually able to do that without spending tons and tons of money. Anyway, next point is frequency. I get a little bit overwhelmed when the frequency of releases are too high. So for example, ColourPop, we'll get into this more obviously as we get into the video, but I do find with the rate of their releases, sometimes it's just overwhelming to keep up, and it's hard to feel that satisfaction of the completion anymore because you're so far down the rabbit hole of just so much. Like you can't, I mean, you blink, you miss stuff type thing. But I also enjoy something coming out with a frequency where I'm not forgetting about those items. There's still some anticipation and excitement around it, but again, not too much. I'm telling you, it's a Goldilocks situation. Next, something that that really makes an item collectible to me is a uniformity in size. So if I'm going to be getting a part 2, a part 3, a 4th edition, whatever, it's so nice when an item is the same size, or they're gonna fit together in a way that's really satisfying to look at, that's like pleasing to feel and have, if that makes sense. And I don't mind if there are different patterns, different colors. I kind of prefer that. So there's like a differentiation and yet still this uniformity throughout the collection. That is like ideal to me and definitely a huge factor, I think, when collecting. If palettes from the same brand keep coming out and they're different shapes and sizes, I definitely feel like it's easier to look at everything as separate, and I don't feel like a compulsion to collect those things nearly as much than when they are in the same size. So even if they're completely different themes, even if they're completely different color stories, if they still have that uniformity, there's a way you can collect them that I enjoy, or that can get me. I like when a brand comes out with lots of varieties. So if they're coming out with palettes, I don't want this slight change of the same thing. I'd rather have something that feels like its own concept, and then a new thing, again, maybe uniform in size, but is its own concept. That's like my preferred way, where each item still feels special enough and different enough to be its own thing. But again, I can still get the satisfaction of having the collection of all of them. All right, the next point, and second to last, we're almost done with this point. I just thought it would be interesting to talk about this. I think that the thought process of what gets you is important if you're trying to combat it, you know what I mean? Like if you're feeling sucked into collecting but you don't actually want to collect, and yet, you know what I mean? I feel like sometimes knowing what gets you is important to stop it, you know? Okay, anyway, I find that if I buy the initial release, like the beginning point of whatever's going to become like a brand's go-to, where they keep releasing things in that line, if I buy that initial product, I am so much more likely to want the second version or the second part, the third part, and so on, until it becomes maybe too frequent or they become too repetitive. Definitely being on that initial launch and being involved in that, especially obviously if you like it, it's something you really enjoy and you use a lot, that is like a very, very big point to me of wanting to collect more of them. And last, I just wanted to mention that even if you aren't collecting a certain type of thing within one brand or one line, maybe you're someone who collects a bunch of different highlighters, maybe you focus on a specific makeup item, like I could see how that would be something fun. Or maybe you really like, let's say, Hello Kitty, and then you tend to pick up any Hello Kitty related items or makeup or something like that. I could see how that would definitely be a fun or a way to collect as well, which is definitely different and probably comes up a little less frequently, as maybe a little bit more special, I would think, because you don't know when those things are gonna happen. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts on collecting. I feel like for me, it's always something I have to like keep in check and like keep in mind what I actually want, because I do like to collect and it does bring me joy, but also I don't want to go like too far overboard where that thing that brought me joy now doesn't, type of thing. So it's always something I keep in check. I'd love to know any of the things that you collect, maybe outside of makeup. What are some collections that you have? Are you a collector type? Do you understand what I'm talking about when it's like this compulsion to complete and satisfy, you know, a finished collection? Let me know. But now let's get into products. I'm gonna start with the past. Let's get a little nostalgic. I want to talk about some of the items that I either used to collect or I find very collectible in the past, and talk about those because they definitely are, yeah, a point of nostalgia for me in the community and like with makeup. First, I want to talk about the ABH palettes. So this all started, well, I don't know if it did technically start with the Modern Renaissance palette, but I feel like it does. I mean, she had the Catwalk palette and a couple other ones before that, even the Maya Mia palette. There was also like the Tamana palette from ABH. So there were some already kind of being collectible, and I was already collecting some of those at the time, but I feel like the Modern Renaissance really started this new wave of like collectible ABH palettes where there was definitely a compulsion in me to want every single one. So when Modern Renaissance came out, I was like on that initial release, I believe. Maybe I bought it later, but I eventually bought that, loved that thing, used it so much, had pan in different shades. Then the Subculture came out, drama, all the stuff. But I think the reason that so many people bought that palette was because the Modern Renaissance was such a success. People wanted to collect the next palette palette in like the range, and it was a unique color story. So there was a lot going for it. And so there's that one. There were so many after that. There's the Norvina palette, the Soft Glam palette, and these are all ones with like the actual velvet outside. But there was also the Prism palette. There was one that was like too long. What was it called? It was like Around the World or something. Let me look it up. World Traveler palette. I think that one was like a little bit longer, but even the Jackie Aina palette that came out later, the Carly Bible palette that came out later, like all of these were all the same size. The Riviera, the Alyssa Edwards, like all of these are the same size, different outsides. And there's definitely this factor to me when I see them that like I could totally see if you started collecting them, how you just want to satisfy collecting all of them. Like you don't want 2, you don't want 3, you don't want 4, you want all of them. Especially too if you genuinely enjoyed a couple of them and you had like the Soul Tree, that's another one. Like so many. There are so many of these palettes. I could see how it would be really easy to want to start to finish that collection out, even if you didn't love the inside color story. There's just something about them, the size, the shape, the different textures, the different colors. I love it. It's just tempting. It's very tempting. It's one of the items that I definitely had to like fight myself not to collect as more and more came out. So yeah, that one to me definitely I thought was like a series of collectible palettes. Next, I want to talk about the Urban Decay Vice palettes that used to come out during the holidays. Urban Decay hasn't done like an old Vice palette in that tradition in a while, but I remember when the Vice palettes were coming out, they at least did it for about 4 years. And so every holiday, a Vice palette would come out. The first holiday it did, everyone was really into it. And so of course next year they like did Vice palette too. Then when I finally got into makeup, I got the 3, I got the 4. There was like a Vice Reloaded palette that didn't even come out during the holidays. I really loved that. And to me, that's like this heyday of Urban Decay. Like for me and what I remember, I just loved my Vice palettes. I loved number 3. I loved number 4. I was like so excited to see the releases when they came out during the holidays and get them and buy them and add them to my collection. Like I just remember it very fondly. And so to me, those ones were very collectible, and there became a time when it was just like in my head, if a Vice palette comes out, I'm gonna buy it. And that's definitely not how I am now, even when I'm collecting, and not how I want my makeup to be, but that's definitely how those ones were for me. I feel like a similar one to that was also the Lorac Mega Pro palettes. I had the Mega Pro one. I was able and lucky enough to get that like on initial launch, which there was like a whole fiasco with that, like weird times on the site and not enough product. Like it sold out very fast, but I was lucky enough to get my hands on that. So I had the Lorac Mega Pro one initially. And then after that, it was like, any Mega Pro, like, yeah, I want it. So I'm pretty sure I had the 2, I had the 3. I don't think I ended up getting the 4. I think at that time I was already starting to be like, okay, let's reevaluate some things. But just Lorac palettes in general in the past were, but I feel like the Mega Pros specifically, because they tended to come around during the holidays, were a very collectible, like collector's type item for me in that time period. Okay, so those are just some of my like past nostalgia ones when it comes to palettes. I want to talk about the ones now that I don't know if I have a full-blown collection of any of these currently. I try really hard to fend off the idea of collecting things only to collect them. Like as much as I enjoy collecting, again, like I said with my makeup, I don't want things necessarily just to have them, just to complete. So it's always this kind of thing I have to fight. But these are the ones that are most tempting to me when I have a few pieces that I have to really evaluate, and I try really hard to make sure I'm making hopefully a better decision as opposed to not when I'm buying. So first, I talked about this, and this is kind of how this video came about, but these are the BH Cosmetics. These are the 16 pan color stories. I have 3 of them right now. I initially started with the Blueberry Muffin palette, which is really quite beautiful. And I don't think this was like the initial start of these palettes, but it was more toward the beginning of their like releasing, I think. Maybe I missed a couple of them. But anyway, trying this, I enjoyed it a lot. And so that made me like, wow, okay, what else is there? Because that palette was popular, and I feel like this format in general with BH has been popular, they've definitely like, I feel like upped production on these 16 pan palettes. So I have the Lost in Los Angeles palette, and I also have the Smitten in Switzerland palette, which I think this one is no longer available, unfortunately. But these are just feel easy. First off, BH Cosmetics fits the like not being too expensive, you know, type thing. So there's something about it where it's like, well, I could get a couple of these every time they launch and it wouldn't like be too much of a stab in the chest, right? I do find that the quality is good, which is always a plus and a need, right? If you're gonna wanna use them. So that makes it tempting to me. On top of, I find the color stories to be at least although they're kind of big at 16 pans, I do think that they're really pretty. They tend to be quite beautiful, and I think they go with the theming of the palettes really well. So this one is a hard one not to like just collect and collect and collect. I've stopped myself at 3, and I intend to keep it that way unless something absolutely spectacular comes along, because I know that although a color story might be great, and although the shadows might be great quality, and maybe I'd even use it, I know that there's a big portion of my buying, maybe not like 90%, but maybe like 50% of my buying would be because I want to like add to the collection, and that's not a good enough reason. So that's definitely one that is a tempting collectible type item to me. Next are these palettes from Kylove, previously known as Musée Beauty. These are little 9 pans, and I just find these first off beautiful. I think the packaging is beautiful. I really like the aesthetic of Kylove. I think that they do interesting color stories as well. So this one is the Triumph of Venus palette, and that's what it looks like. Definitely a little bit more unique than some of the other things on the market and coming out from other brands. So those are all things that I love. But then if you start having 1 or 2, you know, the size of these, the way they all line up, the way that they're different, but like are in a set in a way, it gets me, man. It totally gets me. This is the Honoré palette. I just looked that up because I think I said honor one time, but it's based off the painter and his name. So this one is also really beautiful inside. That's what this one looks like. Oh, so beautiful. And then the last one that I have currently is the Van Gogh, and this is probably, I don't know, I think this might be my favorite one just looking at the color story. I just think there's so much here to work with and to do. It's very inspiring to me, and I really like it. These ones are definitely just tempting. I can see myself in the future when new palettes come out, which I want to note that the Le Jardin palette is coming out. It's being revamped. I think it might have already been launched, so hopefully you know about it. Ooh. I hope it, because it's probably gonna sell out really fast. So I'm planning on getting that. So I'm really excited, and I like, there's a part of me that I just want that palette. You guys already know that, but I'm not gonna lie. There is a satisfaction that it's gonna be the same. My gosh, I hope, right? Can you imagine it's just like slightly larger or something? But I love it. There's just something about it. It feels so good. And I like it over time. I think it's more fun over time where you have one, then you add a second, you add a third. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about ColourPop. We knew we had to go there. I completely understand how ColourPop is such a collectible brand. I mean, now I do think that they just have so many gosh darn releases that it is hard to keep up, and you just have to be so diehard. And also, even though they're relatively affordable, the rate and frequency of release makes it where it's a lot of money still if you were to collect. But they also offer so many different products that you could collect, like the Super Shocks. You could collect just the highlighters. You could collect just certain pieces from collections, or eyeshadow palettes. I remember when the first of the like monochromatic palettes came out, how collectible were those? Seriously, I thought those were really collectible. I think before the monochromatic palettes though were the 12 pan palettes, not this one. This one's the Lush palette, which looks like this if you don't know. But what were they? I remember the I Think I Love You palette. The My Little Pony palette was pretty early on. I'm trying to think of that like first ColourPop palette. What was it? Oh, it was the dupe of the Sunset palette from Natasha Denona. That's what it was. That was the first ColourPop palette. I bought that one. I was so excited for it. It was so affordable at the time. It was like, oh my gosh, it was like one of the first really affordable dupes out there. I feel like that was coming out with really good quality that I remember at least. So I bought that, and then after that, it was hard to not want to collect every gosh darn palette that came out. And at that time, I don't feel like they were coming out with products as frequently as they do now. And so it was really easy to, you know, get the next one, get the next one, get the next one. And even now, like, I just think these are size-wise, price-wise, you know, they tend to have color stories, even though they can get repetitive. Like, they're collectible little guys. They totally know what they're doing with these palettes. And, you know, it's fun when you start getting a couple in a row, you know, and you almost like forget about why you have them. Like, I personally don't want this, but I totally get how it becomes not about like the makeup anymore. anymore. It's just about the thing. And that's what I try to make sure isn't happening. I try to remove just the thing to collect and get it back to like, what is this thing? It's makeup to use. I want to actually use it to give it the love it deserves. I want to put it on my eyeballs. I want to put it on my lips. Like, you know, that's what I want for my makeup. But sometimes with these ones, especially, and their cute little packaging and the theming and all of it, it's tough. It's tough not to collect. I'm doing a pretty good job with ColourPop. I just stay away. I just stay away from the site. I try not to get too sucked in. I just don't do it. Next, this is gonna come as no surprise, and probably the one I'm most apt to collect, especially in the moment, is Natasha Denona. I think the little mini palettes are absolutely so collectible. They're tiny and compact. I think they're just so cute. They're relatively affordable for Natasha Denona, you know, and I have quite a few. So I have the Glam. You guys know, you already know what I have, I'm sure. I just bought the Mini Love. This is my newest edition. I really love the look that I made with it. You guys did too. You like loved that look. I have the Mini Star, I have the Mini Zendo, and I have the Mini Retro. So these ones I just think are so, so cute. I don't have every one, and I don't intend on getting every one, but that is like a very active choice. I have to continuously think about that and make sure I don't like with no thought go by and just complete the collection. I don't need the Xenon like grayscale palette. I don't really love the new one that came out, the Metropolis, personally. Like, yeah, it's pretty, but I like my gold palette better. I don't need that. And these don't even have the added bonus of taking the pans out anyway, so I actively have to stop myself, but I don't plan and intend on collecting all of them, but my gosh, they are super collectible. And I also think that the midi size are pretty collectible. I feel like she's going toward this one. I don't have any of the larger palettes in the plastic. I have the larger, like the gold palette in the older like foam. And I also have the really big palettes, the first ones she really came out with that were large. But I do find that the midi palettes are quite collectible because of the price point, again, being more affordable. Mine is a little rearranged. And that's one of the things, like I've said before, that I really love about the midi palettes is that you can rearrange the shadows because they're just magnetic. And I freaking love that. I love that I can change up the color stories. And that actually is an added bonus to making them more collectible to me because I don't have to look at them as individual color stories. And that's one of the reasons I bought the Sunrise palette, so that I can create new color stories. I've seen a lot of really cool people do that online. I can't remember who does them, but I see them sometimes on Instagram where people will completely change around the Natasha Denona palettes for each season, for new whatever, because they have all of them. And it's like mind-blowing how beautiful and gorgeous they are. You're almost like, why didn't Natasha come out with that one? I mean, technically she did because she's come out with all those shadows at some point, but as one color story, I mean, absolutely stunning. So I find the midi palettes more collectible. On a good price, I can convince myself on these babies. Another one more recently that was in a video kind of inspiring me to make this one about makeup I find really collectible are these Huda Beauty palettes. You guys told me there's like a lawsuit or something. I need to look into that. I had no idea about that. But anyway, these are the plastic ones. When she initially came out with the Obsessions palettes, there were 4 initially that were like mostly all neutral except for the electric one, and they were all in cardboard. And then she came out with the Gemstone Obsessions, which were more monochromatic, which then ColourPop made their monochromatics after. But those were also in the cardboard. Those were really collectible to me. And since then, she's upgraded to this more plastic packaging. It's a little more substantial. I hate that change, you know, because that's part of like the uniformity in size, no longer uniform. But now that they're in this, I totally see how these little 9 pans are so gosh darn collectible. There's something about it that's definitely satisfying, but I have tried to also stay away from that because I don't need to just collect things when it comes to makeup, okay? I don't need it, even though I kind of like it in a fantasy world. Last, I wanted to talk about the 6-pan palettes from Kaleidos. I believe I have all of them, and that's definitely because they were sent to me, so that is the reason I'm able to collect all of them, but I definitely find them to be collectible. They are all uniform, but again, they all are slightly different in the way that they look and the color story. I like that they're small, and I think the color stories are just so pretty. This one's my favorite one, Astro Pink. This one is Sci-Fi Greens, which is more of like a grungy green gold palette. This one is the Bronze, Cyber Bronze palette. And these 3 were the initial palettes that came out. I think this was the first PR I ever got from Kaleidos, were these 3 palettes. And I loved them so much. So then when they came out with 2 more in the same collection, I was so excited. And that was the VR Neon palette, which I think has been discontinued. It is just stunning. So bright, rainbow, and this was the first time we started seeing these beautiful, flaky, really shimmery textures from Kaleidos, and that was so exciting. Or at least that I had. I think maybe they were in the first palette, but I never got that. I never got that one. Anyway, this is the Electro Turquoise, and then after that, they also came out with these two. So there is Sashimi City and the Lunar Lavender. These were the last to release in these 6 pans, so they haven't continued on with these since. So this feels like it might be like the completed collection, but definitely these are one of those items that felt very collectible in my collection while they were releasing them. Again, I'm not sure if they'll continue, but they've come out with about 3 other eyeshadow palettes since, and they've all been a little bit different. And I just haven't felt necessarily that same like collectible feeling like I did with these ones. Okay, I thought that was it, but there is one more. I have these little Lorac minis here, and I have to say there's something about these that is kind of collectible, but they also can kind of segue us into actually the last category of this video, which I'm sure this video is hella long, so thanks for being here, guys. I hope you like it. But I find these collectible, but also I don't, and there are some reasons for pros and cons. We'll get into it, and then I'll get into some other items out there that seem like they should be collectible maybe to me, but I'll get into why they aren't, at least not for me. I love how small these are. I really love the formula of these eyeshadows, and I've even talked about in this video how in the past I was collecting Lorac eyeshadow palettes. They are stunning. This one is Simmering palette. It's like a warm, more bronzy color. And then this is the sparkling. These two were a part of like the kind of original line, not like limited edition or from a specific collection. I really love that. I love that they have the names on the outside, but they aren't different colors. I really would love for them to be slightly different in terms of the outer packaging, so it's easier to know which one I'm going for from the outside without having to read that. And then these are more recent. These came out with the Fairy Tale Forest collection and that palette, which I have a video on. I'll leave it linked down below if you want to check it out. But this is Winter Rose, very similar to Sparkling. Mystic Oak has probably been my favorite one. And then we have Frosted Sequoia, which has some warm tones and cool tones in it. And I just think these are like so cute. I really like them, but that outer packaging definitely makes it not as fun to collect. Like there's not this like fun feeling as much. Price is great though. I do love the price of these. These retail for like $15, but if you can find them on a discount, you can get them even cheaper. I think the other thing that would make them more collectible, again, kind of like the Natasha Denona minis, I wish that you could take the shadows out, because other Lorac shadows you can do that with, but for some reason the minis, they didn't do that. So these are on the fence. Like it's gonna be tempting, but I'll probably stick to actual color story being good, or the shadows being, you know, something different texturally or something. And that brings us to the 2 brands that I feel like could be, or like there's almost something, but it's missing. The collectability to me is missing. First, I want to talk about Pat McGrath, which I love Pat McGrath stuff, but I've never been someone tempted to collect her stuff because one, price point, it is very expensive. It's like $125 per one of the large palettes. The quads are quite expensive as well. I do find that I enjoy, especially like some of those more special shades, the flaky shades, all of that. Like they're beautiful shadows. It has nothing to do with the quality. It's just a high price point to start collecting at. You know what I mean? I also find that over time, as I've seen more and more of these come out, especially where we're at today, I don't find that each palette is distinct enough for me to feel the need to buy each one. I feel like instead with her palettes, I could look at the range and buy the one that suits me best and feel satisfied. I don't feel that extra need to want to collect all of them because there's like too many repeat shades. So that stops me from wanting to like compulsively collect them. And last, I feel like the outer packaging is stunning and also different, but still cohesive between them. But that outer packaging is not what's actually inside. And so all of them are this like lacquered black packaging case, and I don't want to collect like 10 of those same cases. Kind of like with the Lorac ones, it's hard to tell them apart visually once they don't have that outer packaging on them, and that's another thing that doesn't make them like fun to collect. It just looks like a lot of stuff instead of something that I can visually see as different and exciting and like memories attached to type thing. So that's one of the reasons I don't feel necessarily even tempted to collect the Pat McGrath palettes. Last brand I want to talk about, Violet Voss, because this is another brand that, you know, they release a lot of stuff and I feel like they have different color stories and whatnot, but there's just something off. I don't know what it is. I don't find it collectible. I feel like they've gone through a lot of different sizes. They've had like the large sizes, they've had the smaller sizes. I've seen different pan sizes at different times. I feel like more recently there was like this wildflower palette. It's called Windflower, not wildflower, my bad, but the Windflower palette, and all the ones in a very similar size. These ones are the most collectible to me, but I still just can't quite get myself to do it. They've been coming out with these even before that, because there was like a gingerbread one that came out a while ago for like holiday, and there's something that it seems like these should be collectible to me, but I don't quite do it. The price point I feel like is there, but I think there's just not quite enough for the collection in the way that ColourPop does. Like I feel like ColourPop just has a little bit better knowing what's trendy to market the same color shadows that might be in some of these palettes. So they just don't quite get me. But yeah, it almost seems like, well, why not that one? But there's just something missing. But anyway, I don't know if this video is weird as shit, probably, but I hope you enjoyed it. I feel like, you know, being in the community, if you're like hardcore in the community, you probably know at least somewhat I'm talking about, maybe. But I would love to know what like palettes or like lines of palettes or brands or whatever are the most collectible to you and why. Also, I'd love to just know, like, how do you look at your makeup collection? Do you think of it like a true collection where you are fine with collecting for the sake of collecting, or do you want your makeup collection to be something that is more for using only and you get rid of stuff that you're not? I'd love to know, because I know I've been both sides and I feel like I try to occupy this middle ground definitely now. That's best for me and my brain about all of it, but I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on any of this. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks so much for being here. Other than that, I will see you in my next video, and I hope you're doing well. So till then, bye.